And now, a message from our sponsor. Made in Canada, Niche RMS 365 sets the standard for police RMS worldwide, serving more than 168,000 sworn officers in Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States. That's more than their top 8 competitors combined. The UI provides a consistent, intuitive user experience so agencies can simply train once and use anywhere, on any device. It's the most highly configurable, capable, and respected RMS platform in the world. One demo and you'll know. Learn more at www.nicherms.com. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Blue Line the Podcast, a podcast created for and aimed at all members of law enforcement. I'm Brittani Schroeder, editor of Blue Line magazine. Today's special guest is Ryan Teschner, Ontario's Inspector General of Policing. In his role, Ryan strives to improve sector performance and accountability by ensuring compliance with Ontario's policing legislation and regulations. At the end of May, Ryan and his team released the first Spotlight report focusing on the state of public order policing in Ontario. Now, Ryan and I will be discussing his findings and recommendations, as well as his vision for improving police performance across the province. Thank you so much for joining me today, Ryan.
Brittani, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
To start us off, I'd love for you to give our listeners a brief background of your role and the last 2 years that you've been on the job since taking over as Inspector General of Policing in 2023.
Thanks for the question. And I want to just provide a bit of education for your viewers. So the role of the Inspector General of Policing is the first of its kind anywhere in Canada. Ontario's government brought in a brand new piece of policing legislation called the Community Safety and Policing Act, which came into force on April the 1st of 2024. That was a brand new piece of legislation after over 30 years of the previous. What the Inspector General of Policing does that's unique, though, when it comes to policing oversight, is it looks at both sides, as I call it, of the policing house. How police services are delivered by our 44 police services across this province, and whether or not those are effective and adequate ways of delivering policing. But it also looks at the governance of policing that is conducted by police service boards. And so uniquely, this role sees both sides of the house and seeks to ensure that both boards and services are complying with Ontario's policing laws, but more importantly, I think, moving them towards improved performance right across Ontario. So since April 1st of 2024, we've been very busy at the Inspectorate of Policing. When we opened our doors that day, we started to receive public complaints by members right across this province who have concerns they want to bring to our attention about the delivery of policing or the conduct of board members. And we've received over 900 of those complaints to date.
Wow.
But we've also been touring the entire province. I made a commitment when I came into the role that I would visit each and every one of our 44 police services locally where they deliver those services. And so we're now in our very final leg of what we've called the IG tours, where I get to sit down with chiefs of police and their command teams and board members across the province, introduce them to the role of the Inspector General and how we're approaching the delivery of our mandate here at the Inspectorate of Policing, but importantly, also hear from them about what they're seeing that's working well locally in their communities and where they also are feeling some challenges. We've also engaged right across this country and in fact internationally with other oversight bodies to learn lessons from them and share some of our insights with organizations like His Majesty's Inspectorate of the Constabulary and Fire Services in the UK, the Chicago Office of the Inspector General, and right across Canada, all of our counterparts that are part of the Canadian Association for the Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, or CACOL. We've also been working with Ontario's very first constituted First Nations police service that have opted in to this new legislation, and that's the Anishinaabe-Aski Police Service and its board. We met with them just before they opted in to introduce ourselves and our mandate, and just recently spent almost 3 hours with the entire board and the chief of police to introduce them to my management team, and so they could hear about all of the work that we're doing as the Inspectorate of Policing. Importantly, I also launched our very first issue-specific inspection into the Thunder Bay Police Service and its board, and specifically into the way that they conduct death and missing person investigations. And so the inspection team has just finished dozens and dozens of interviews and are in the process of reviewing documents and material to further that inspection. And we will be seeking to try and complete that inspection sometime in 2025. And as you mentioned, released our very first spotlight report into public order policing, looking right across the province at the way in which our 44 police services deliver public order policing for protests and major events where we're seeing more and more of these. And we looked at ways that they are leveraging one another and also complying with the new act, but also importantly, looked at ways in which we could improve the system. And I've got 12 recommendations, which I'll talk to you about a little bit later. And I'll just say, while we're doing all of this work, we made it a priority to embed data and analytics into what we do and how we do it. And so here at the Inspectorate of Policing, we have a whole branch called the Center for Data, Intelligence, and Innovation. They are constantly working with police services and boards to collect data so that we can turn that data into intelligence, paint a true picture of the way that policing is delivered across Ontario, and again, identify areas of strength and, importantly, areas of opportunity or challenge where the work of the inspectorate becomes all the more important. And lastly and finally, at our one-year anniversary, April 1st of 2025, we published our very first inaugural strategic plan that takes a look at the next 3 years of our work, identifies 3 key priorities, and some of the specific pieces of work we're going to do to live up to those priorities. So it's been, as you said, very busy.
Very busy. Like that's like 5 years of work that you've done in a year. So that's incredible.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, incredible, and a credit to the team here at the Inspectorate.
Very much so, and a credit to yourself as well. Now, we're going to dive into this topic of the Spotlight Report on public order policing in Ontario. And I really would love to know why this was a priority for you and your team right from the start.
Well, we want to tackle issues that matter, and we want to tackle issues where there is value that we can add in terms of the way that policing is delivered or governed in this province. And so we set out under the old legislation to conduct an inspection to test our processes. And the issue that we chose was public order policing. Public order maintenance is one of the essential, necessary functions that every police service has to deliver or be able to deliver. And it's all about that balance between facilitating freedom of expression and association under our charter, while also making sure that those that come out to protest or those that are going about their day-to-day lives can do so safely. And as you know, police officers are at the front line of striking that balance. So what more important an issue, especially as we see that geopolitical and other events are causing people to take to streets and protest and have their voices heard. And so we set out and conducted an inspection of all 44 police services, that's the 43 municipal police services plus the Ontario Provincial Police, to see how they were complying with some of the essential requirements in this area, and again, identify opportunities for improved performance for the system overall. And so we noticed some very important things. For example, over the 4-year period that we looked at, we noticed a 184% increase in the deployment of public order units right across this province. These are happening at a large scale. They're often happening for longer periods of time. And so we're seeing both more deployment, but of course, escalating costs associated with that deployment. Whether you look at examples like the Freedom Convoy, or you look at more recent examples in Toronto with the Israel-Hamas war and the protests happening surrounding that, or other events like unsanctioned St. Patrick's Day parades in Waterloo, or the solar eclipse that required Niagara Police and its partners to facilitate over 1 million visitors just for that event alone.
Right.
All of these things come with a cost. They come with a cost to the people doing public order policing, and they come with a financial cost to the police services that have to administer it. And so we took a look at the system and asked ourselves how it's performing now and how we can make sure that it can continue to perform strongly into the future.
Now, before we dive into your 12 recommendations, I'd love for you to give us kind of like a high level, some of your key findings throughout this study.
Well, let me start with the most important one. I found in this report that the state of public order policing in Ontario is strong. I also found that it was showing signs of strain. And so from a value add perspective, we wanted to look at what were the causes of some of those strains and how could the system, whether it's police services, boards, or government, tackle those early indications of strain. And so we realized, of course, that the scope and magnitude of public order policing has been changing. These events are becoming more complex, sometimes more drawn out, and sometimes just simply more of them locally to handle. So clearly, public order policing is increasingly becoming a whole of province priority and responsibility. And there's probably no better example of that than the Freedom Convoy protests that happened in 2022, where you had instances of protest in Ottawa, in Windsor, and at other locations, literally right across the province. But with this provincial responsibility comes a need to open up important discussions about how to sustain our current some delivering for all model of public order policing in the long term. So following the inspection and based on my findings, again, my conclusion is the state of public order policing in Ontario is strong. The legal and governance infrastructure that needs to be in place on balance is in place, generally in the form of police service board policies, chief of police procedures, and operational planning processes. But as I said, we also noticed signs of strain, that the system is becoming stretched because it's got to recover from high demand and increased complexity. So a greater surge in deployments, as I mentioned, 184% increase over a period of just 4 years. Second issue we noticed was recruitment and fatigue challenges for the officers that are on the front line delivering public order policing. One thing that's important for your viewers to know is no police service in Ontario has a dedicated standalone public order unit where that is all those officers do. Every public order unit officer in Ontario has another responsibility on a day-to-day basis. And then they get deployed to public order when they need to. Yep. So you can imagine the fatigue and the strain that can come, especially from longer deployments. We also realized third, escalating costs. I mentioned the Freedom Convoy, which cost Ottawa $800,000 a day in policing alone. Or you take the St. Patrick's Day example in Waterloo, where it's over $300,000 for a 3-day parade. And then, of course, in Toronto, with the Israel-Hamas war, recently it was reported in the span of a year over $12 million in costs just for those protests alone. So there is increased policing that come with an accompanying increased cost. But of course, you also have limited resources.
Yep.
Right now, only 11 police services in Ontario, including the OPP, deliver public order policing, have public order units. So those are 11 delivering for 44.
Wow.
And so this obviously places a strain on a small segment of the sector to deliver for the rest of the sector.
Yeah.
And lastly, we realized some operational gaps. The report identified areas where it was sometimes unclear when public order units were going to be deployed. And so some decision-making and criteria of a more consistent nature around that, some strategic deployment ability through the public order hub, which I'll talk about, and enhanced training so that when officers are on the ground policing a particular protest, they've got more context in mind so that they can do so safely, respectfully, and in a manner in keeping with our charter values here in Canada.
Those are some incredible findings, and I can see how there have been 12 recommendations that have come out of this. I'd love to dive into those, and if talking about all 12 of them would keep us here for 4 hours, I totally understand if we only touch on a few, but I'd love to talk about those most important recommendations, the things that need to be really addressed right now. Can you tell us about some of those?
Absolutely. And I'd love to talk for 4 hours, but I'll give the Coles Notes version. First of all, we recognize that Ontario is a big province. And as I mentioned, it's 11 police services delivering this function for all 44.
Hmm.
In Ontario during the convoy, a hub model was created where different police services that needed public order assistance could come to the hub, make that request, and everybody who has a responsibility to deliver public order policing would be around the same table. This allows for strategic decisions around deployment, making sure that the right resources are in the right places and that there's the ability to move them around as needed. The hub has a vital role in coordinating public order deployment across Ontario. And so one of my most significant recommendations is to actually formalize and make permanent the public order hub. And I've called on the Ontario government, the Ministry of Solicitor General, to actually embed the hub model into legislation. The second has to do with training. I mentioned that there are certain requirements in Ontario that every member of a public order unit must go through in terms of training, and that obviously needs to continue. That's a bottom line basic compliance requirement. But as we see more and more that geopolitical events around the world are influencing what happens on the ground here in Ontario, it's important for those officers to have that context, to have that awareness, so that if they are entering into a particular public order event, they've got that in mind and they've got that awareness as they exercise their public order policing function. And so we have suggested through my recommendation that that enhanced training increasingly become part of what police officers are exposed to. Third has to do with decisions around when you deploy a public order unit. And so I've recommended that there be a single risk assessment tool that every police service across this province use consistently. It will help ensure that the level of risk and the right type of response is considered in a similar way by any chief of police making a decision about when to deploy a public order unit. There's really no reason why we need to have different ways of assessing the same thing. And so I have suggested a single risk assessment approach, again, that eventually be baked in to legislation. Another recommendation had to do with integration of the response. So we've heard through our inspection great things when police services work with fire services, work with emergency medical services. And so I've suggested in my report again that integration occur both at the training level so that these emergency partners are training together and get to know how these deployments should work in a coordinated fashion, and eventually that they enter into MOUs, again, that get legislated so that that becomes the operating model no matter where you are in the province. It'll help keep officers safe and help keep people safe as well.
That's incredible. And it sounds like a lot of thought and consideration went into creating these recommendations. And for anyone who wants to read all of the recommendations, they are on the Inspectorate of Policing's website, and that will be linked in our description as well. I would love to know what time frame you've asked for these recommendations to be implemented at services and boards across the province.
This is a really important question, actually, because one of the things that I also vowed to do in taking on this role was to collaborate as much and everywhere we can. At the end of the day, while our role is oversight, we want to make sure that police services and boards are succeeding because in their success, Ontarians are safer. And so before finalizing the report, we reached out to the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police and the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards, as well as some of the police associations across the province. We sat them down, walked them through the recommendations, gave them an opportunity to digest them, and importantly, the day that I released my report, all of these organizations put out public statements endorsing the report. And so I think that speaks to a level of commitment to implementing the recommendations directed to each segment of the sector, whether it's chiefs and services or boards in their governance role. And so we will continue to monitor the implementation of these recommendations. We will continue also to evaluate their implementation through future inspections to make sure, yes, that there is compliance, but importantly, that people are really meeting this bar that we have set in terms of excellence and improved performance.
Course. And I assume a big part of this is also advocating with the government, like you said, the Ministry of the Solicitor General, to help get this into legislation as well. I assume that's a big part.
That's right. I mean, we laid out what I think is a bit of a roadmap for improving the overall public order policing system in Ontario. Obviously, the government has a role to play, and they now have these recommendations for their consideration.
That's great. Now, of course, Blue Line's audience is countrywide. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are on what other provinces can take from this report and maybe learn from and take to their own services.
We've created a lot of great connective tissue with our oversight partners right across the country, in fact, right around the world. Just last week, I was in New Brunswick for CACOL, that's the Canadian Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement's annual conference. I was able to speak about the work of the Inspectorate of Policing, my role as Inspector General of Policing, and this Spotlight report as an example. And I can tell you whether it was our partners in Alberta, or BC, or Nova Scotia, or Prince Edward Island, or New Brunswick, even Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, who were also there, they're all interested in our work. They're interested in what we're doing and how we're doing it, how we're leveraging data and our work with the sector to improve the overall performance bar. And what I said to them is, take this report and ask yourself how you can apply it locally within your own jurisdiction. And some of them committed to do that and committed to staying in touch. And so we're seeing through collaboration with our partners, again, right across the country and even globally, a lot of uptake on our mandate, a lot of interest in what we're doing and how we're doing it. And that's a source of inspiration, really, for the members of the inspectorate who come in and do this work every day.
Now that you've released your findings on the public order policing and the state of this in Ontario, what's your next top priority? What are you going to be looking at next?
Well, we laid out a strategic plan because we wanted to have a compass. We wanted to have a bit of a roadmap as to where we were going and knew that we were on the right track. And so our strategic plan, which is also available on the Inspectorate's website, lays out three important priorities. But when you take them all together, they're all about making sure that we are applying our oversight mandate in places where it matters to the public, matters to the profession and the sector that deliver policing, and will over time raise, as I said, that performance bar right across this province. And so we're going to obviously continue to investigate the public complaints that we receive. We will continue to identify proactively areas like public order policing or response times that we want to take a harder look at with the sector to identify ways to propel that improved performance. And we will continue to speak publicly about our work so that we're educating residents right across Ontario about the good work that's happening in policing. And we're working with the sector to zone in on areas where bringing everybody together and focusing on areas of improved performance will continue to make everyone in Ontario safer. So we have laid out things like developing a center of excellence that will allow us to identify areas where there is some good work happening that we want to spread right across the province, but also at the same time, identify areas where maybe there hasn't been as much work done, bring chiefs of police and boards together and tackle those issues in a way that we can see improved performance and look around corners to see what's coming at Ontario policing so that we can be ready for it. And again, make sure that our police services and boards can function not just in compliance, but at a state of excellence.
The compass will lead you guys to great places, and I would like to now know, for you as the Inspector General of Policing, what would you personally like to see? What are your hopes over the next few years, or while you're in this role, what would you like to see happen?
I guess a few things. I mentioned the Center of Excellence because I think that's what we have to live and breathe here at the Inspectorate. And so, as we do the work to actually put that Center of Excellence in place, I hope that over time, the sector, but importantly the public, will start to see the real value in making sure, again, that we're looking around those corners and helping police services and boards be their best. I also would like to see us continue to leverage our relationships right across the country and the globe with other oversight bodies, learn lessons from those that have been doing this work longer than we have, but importantly, contribute to a conversation happening right around the globe about the importance of civilian oversight in law enforcement, not just because it puts people under a microscope, but actually because it can help people be better at what they do. And in policing, public consent is at the root of everything that police services do. And I think by bringing accountability, by shining a light on what's working well, and by looking for ways to improve what needs improvement, we're going to help police services make sure that they're delivering at a level and in a way that inspires enhanced public confidence. And so I think in all that we do, whether it's how we respond to public complaints, the issues that we pick proactively, how we use data to drive analytics, I want to make sure that we're all swimming in the direction of improved performance to make everyone in Ontario safer.
Ryan, I just want to say on behalf of Blue Line and our audience that's listening in today, thank you so much for joining me on this month's podcast episode. I know conducting this type of industry investigation and creating these meaningful recommendations is no easy task. So I'm just saying thank you, and I know it'll ultimately lead to better policing for our communities. So again, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Brittany, for having me.
Course. Now, for everyone who tuned in, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Blue Line the Podcast. You can check us out on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also stay up to date on all of your Canadian policing news at blueline.ca. Until next time, stay safe and be well. And now, a message from our sponsor. Made in Canada, Niche RMS 365 sets the standard for police RMS worldwide, serving more than 168,000 sworn officers in Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States. That's more than their top 8 competitors combined. The UI provides a consistent, intuitive user experience so agencies can simply train once and use anywhere, on any device. It's the most highly configurable, capable, and respected RMS platform in the world. One demo and you'll know. Learn more at www.nicherms.com.